let's say it makes 5% of people effectively unemployable. People who lack the necessary talent and the necessary mindset to be able to retrain into a role that's going to be able to get them gainful employment in the age of AI. Now, that's not a lot. That's not a large proportion of workers. You're literally talking, 1 in 20 at the most. If those people effectively become unemployable, the attitude towards welfare at a political level is going to shift overnight. You saw that during COVID. When the government thought there was going to be mass unemployment, they just thought, oh crap, people are going to realize just how badly people on unemployment benefits have to live. We better double it. We got to do something. Otherwise, there's going to be riots in the streets. Like that was sort of the perception at the time. And I think if all of a sudden instead of having, excuse me, 900,000 or a million, I think it's little over a million people at the moment, or 1.05 million people on various unemployment benefits. If that all of a sudden rises by another 5% of the labor force, so what, another 700, 800,000 people, the government's going to have problems. They're going to have a problem in terms of how are these people going to vote? Once Liberal vote, once Labor voters all of a sudden, and the Greens turn around and they're going to go, well, we're going to do this for you. Or One Nation says, we're going to do this for all the people who are hard hit by AI. All of a sudden, all these different parties providing a different alternative to desperate people is going to start looking pretty damn appealing. But then there's also the fiscal side of things. How are you going to fund an extra 700,000 people on unemployment benefits? And not only that, but how are you then, are those people then going to demand significantly greater levels of support? Is all of a sudden the calls of, St. Vincent de Paul or the Australian Council of Social Services, those particular calls going to all of a sudden sound a whole lot more appealing to a lot more people, forcing the government to spend additional money? And what knock-on effects does that have? So there's a lot of moving parts there going on, and I think it could really get quite difficult with only a relatively small proportion of the workforce being impacted.
Yeah, and I've had this view for some time that the universal basic income philosophy is something which we may see more of. In other words, because there isn't jobs for everybody in the future, maybe governments will have to actually just hand out money up to a certain level, and it can change the structure of society. So we don't know how it's going to play out, but I do think that the hype around AI is probably peak hype at the moment, and I'm always thinking that if I think of the internet, I was around in the in the 90s and was very much thinking about some of these evolutionary forces for the internet, and I always said the short-term impacts are probably overhyped. The long-term impacts potentially are actually underhyped. And if you stand back from the perspective now, well, the internet's everywhere and it's just part of the way we do things, it's probably going to be similar. But I think the fiscal, financial, and social consequences are probably ones that should be thought through.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, to be completely honest with you, I don't think that they're going to be thought through by policymakers. I think that.
Oh, really?
I think that, yeah. I think it's more likely that they're going to be slapped in the face with it and then forced into
Correct.
whatever action is they feel is necessary at the time.
Yeah, reactive rather than proactive.